Thank you for joining our Ask Me Anything neurodiversity session today. It's probably fair to say that the COVID-19 situation is quite challenging for everyone, but it can be a particularly difficult one for those who are autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, and so on. And therefore, over the next hour, we will answer questions we've received from the audience. Quite a few of you have submitted questions on anything neurodiversity, from homeschooling, home life, to work and well-being. My name is Maike, and I lead the neurodiversity projects. Sorry, I'm all over the place. Let me start again. My name is Maike, that part went well, and I lead the diversity projects neurodiversity workstream. I am joined today by a panel of truly amazing brains. We've got Lizzie Buzz, who's Executive Director at MUFG Investor Services, and Lizzie is also mum of 3 neurodiverse children. We've got Adam Livesey. Adam is Divisional COO Support at Deutsche Bank, and he joined Deutsche through their Autism Internship Program in 2016. Jennifer Ockwell. Jenny is a partner at Triple Point Investments and mother of 2 autistic boys. And our 4th panelist is David, who's a senior actuary in a major insurance group and has Aspergers. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. We're going to record this session. If you don't want your face to appear anywhere, please just stop the video. And also, if you aren't already on mute and you're not one of the panelists, if you could click the mute button so we limit background noise, that would be great. Before we go into the first question submitted by the audience, let me just ask our panel. This is the activity previously known as going around the table, so we're going to do this virtually today, of course. But let me ask our panel, what have you been struggling with most during lockdown? Jenny, do you want to make a start?
Yes, good morning everybody, and apologies that you can't see my face. It's not because I'm still in my pajamas, I promise. I'm just having some considerable Wi-Fi issues. I live in very rural Rutland, which is 100 miles north of London, so we are the last people, or the last county to get their Wi-Fi networks working, so apologies in advance. But in terms of what the biggest challenge for me has been during lockdown, it has most definitely been balancing working full-time at the same time as managing 2 little boys. They're autistic, but they're 2 little boys as well, you know, like any other parent, juggling the work life with family life, and with everything that comes with running a house as well. You know, preparing 3 meals a day, queuing to go to the supermarket, cleaning all weekend. It's been truly exhausting. And I think there's a phrase that's being used a lot at the moment, which is during this lockdown period, it hasn't been working from home. It has been living at work, because there has been no seemingly start or end time to your working day. So people have been working longer hours than ever before. And so working longer hours and combined with the pressures of home life, it's been exhausting. So that's me.
Adam, do you have something to share? What did you struggle with?
I would echo quite a lot of that as well. So I think for me, the biggest thing I've struggled with is being able to turn off at night. So not, you know, normally you go into work, or if you're working from home, it's like a set day. And with it being so continuous, kind of struggling to differentiate the line at the end of the day and saying, okay, that's enough for today. I think is a lot harder when you don't have an environment that you can walk out of if you're living in your office. So the rest of it, yeah, getting by. And I noticed one of the questions was about, you know, just managing to feed yourself with 3 meals a day. And it is a change, because normally you'd prepare a lunch, or you'd get your lunch at work, and you'd get breakfast maybe on the way in, and now it's 3 meals a day, kind of looking after yourself. It's really been for me like a bit of a wellness exercise as well, in terms of how do I kind of recognize my wellness needs in the day and act upon them.
Yeah, great. Yeah, we're going to touch on that a little bit later. I think quite a few of us have been struggling with that aspect, whether neurodivergent or not. Lizzie, do you want to add your view? What did you struggle with?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here today. A quick introduction: with 2 full-time working parents, both working for big banks. We've got a colourful rainbow of different acronyms and labels within our family. There's 3 neurodiverse children. There are some questionably diverse guinea pigs. There's a puppy. There's I don't know how many fish. It's chaos. It's a very busy house at the best of times. But I have to say, the thing I've struggled with the most is actually something I struggled with the most pre-lockdown anyway, and that's the meltdowns. Not mine, the kids.
That's also something which we're going to hopefully get some useful tips on managing. Thank you. David, what was your biggest struggle during lockdown?
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. Somewhat similar to Adam, I would say it's switching off from work. It's great not commuting, but it also removes the natural switching off process. So while I'd happily, say, read my magazine or newspaper on the train, it never quite seems worthwhile doing so at home. It's always an indulgence, as if a voice is saying, is there really nothing useful you could actually be doing right now? And without that break, it's a commute. The commute isn't fun, but it does provide that mental break between work and home and the ability to shift gears. Without that change of gear in the working day, I do find that the hours just become longer and the blurring isn't actually helpful because it takes the structure out of the day.
Yeah, that's right. Perfect. Thank you so much. So without further ado, let's jump into our first topic, and that is homeschooling and home life in general. I'm going to read out the first question. Question number 1 is, my kids, 10 and 8, are both dyslexic. During the weeks of lockdown, I noticed that they both advanced in their reading skills. I think this might be because they feel less pressured and less under surveillance from teachers and classmates. What's your view on this? Was your experience similar? What lessons can be learned from our lockdown experience when we all return to normal school life? Sounds like a perfect question for Lizzie.
Yeah, so 2 of my children also have dyslexia, and they're similar ages. They're 8 and 12. And if I think about my 8-year-old dyslexic girl first, for her, there's been lots of factors. I think it's less about surveillance and pressure from teachers and classmates for her, and it's more about the opportunities that home learning has presented. So the relative peace and quiet compared to a busy classroom, the slower pace of life, and the ability to work at her own pace and to take longer on tasks. And for her, it's the reduced distractions as well. And like I'm sure many of you will relate to, we've had to adopt a slower pace of life during the lockdown. And I think that, you know, the lack of demand in some way, the lack of having to be at a certain place, a certain time to drop this one off or pick that one up, and all those kind of things have forced us to go slower and to relax. And I think that that's permeated everything, including things like reading and learning for sure. So evening stories are longer, because I haven't just got off a packed commuter train, a packed tube, I'm desperate for a shower, I'm starving hungry, and I'm like, right, you've got 1 page each kid because I'm knackered. I've got time. I can sit on their beds and read with them for longer. And so I think that's really, really helped. I think as well, like seeing me reading, so I'm not a big TV fan. The kids will always find me reading or writing in any spare time. And I think that's, you know, that's a unique opportunity that they've been able to see me do that. So I think that's hopefully rubbed off a little bit. Then going to my elder daughter, she's 12. In preparation for this call, I thought I'd ask her and see what she thought. So the 8-year-old's literally flourished with home learning. Her readings come on leaps and bounds, etc. But the eldest, the 12-year-old, has struggled. Both children have the same diagnosis, which is dyslexia, dyspraxia, and dyscalculia. So the same diagnoses. And the eldest explained to me that she likes to learn with everything, with all of her senses. She likes to look around the classroom, think about who's next to her, listen to the teacher, look outside, and all those things add to her memories, and they help her to understand things and to remember things. So it's like a multi-sensory learning experience for her, and that helps solidify those memories. And so without that, she's just on her own in her room with a laptop, and she struggled with that. And for me, that's been really fascinating that both children have the same diagnoses on paper, similar age, 4 years difference, quite a lot in child years, but not poles apart. Yeah, they both reacted very differently. And so in terms of lessons learned to go forward, that just reminds me of how individual we all are, and how the work and home and school and every environment can do better by customizing our environment to optimize whatever works for that person. So it's just a stark reminder of how different we all are. And if you think about companies, like, this whole lockdown has made us all think about working from home and working more flexibly. What's the future of work going to look like? Yet I suspect that with schools, we'll just go back to normal. And I think that's a real disappointment. I'd hope that we can use some of these lessons and ask for similar sort of considerations, maybe some flexibility even at schools as well.
Hopefully, yeah. Thank you for the insight. Second question. My autistic son, 11, struggled with the sudden change to his daily routine when we all started homeschooling. He has still not fully adapted to the new processes and is highly anxious. How can I help him? Jenny, I think that's a perfect question for you.
It is indeed, thank you, not least because I also have an 11-year-old autistic boy who suffers with the comorbidity of acute anxiety disorder, so I can completely relate to this question. I mean, I would start by saying that the first few weeks of lockdown were probably some of the hardest days we've ever experienced as a family, and we've had a lot of dark days over the years. Like a lot of children on the autistic spectrum, routine is everything. So even a slight deviation to a daily plan on a normal day can lead to quite significant meltdowns. And in addition, what a lot of autistic children find is that they really struggle with taking schoolwork into the home life. So lots of autistic children struggle with doing homework because they like to have school at school time and home at home time. So bringing homeschooling into day-to-day, your daily life is a real challenge. And to be told that there's no school this week, probably not next week, next month, and you might not actually return to your primary school at all before you move on to secondary school, which brings with it, its own host of problems. Oh, by the way, mummy and daddy work full time and don't have the time or the skill set, frankly, to teach you. Has manifested in some severe anxiety in our house. So the way Alex presented his anxiety is that he peeled the skin off his face, off his hands and his feet, and his little body has been red raw for months now. And in addition, he would rock back and forth for hours, continually banging his head on the wall, often until he bled. So my husband and I made a decision really early on that we were just not going to engage with homeschooling. We just could not cope with that level of anxiety within the house. And instead our focus was very much going to be on ensuring that we looked after the mental health of our children and us as well as their parents. So that's not to say there weren't any boundaries. There absolutely were. There was no gaming between, in school hours between 9 and 4. We made sure that they did one aspect of physical exercise every day, but instead we tried to engage the children in subjects that they were genuinely interested in, whether that was creating Lego buildings, whether it was reading about dinosaurs or doing it. I mean, one day, for example, we asked them to watch Lion King for the 725th time, and they had to write down all of the animals that they would find in an African savannah, and whether they were herbivores or omnivores or carnivores, and whether they were night creatures or day creatures. I mean, we just were creative in the way that we got them to learn. Specifically in terms of anxiety and how you can help, I think my advice would be to be honest with the children. At 11, you can engage with them at a certain level of maturity, certainly with our children, and recognise the fact that up until this point, our children have been able to ask us, their parents, any question, and to a degree they've been able to expect an answer that would satisfy them. But over the last 3 months, we've not been able to give them answers to questions like, when am I going back to school? When am I going to see my friends again? Are you going to die? Are we going to die? Why is it social distancing at 2 meters and not 1 meter? And frankly, they're questions that I would like answers to. So it's not surprising that our children are anxious when most of us, whether we're neurodivergent or neurotypical, are also anxious. So the way that we've been framing the discussion at home is to say over and over and over again that we don't know all of the answers at the moment. None of us have ever lived through a period like this, but know that all of the best brains all over the world are working night and day to find a cure for this virus. And that until we have, your family and your school are going to be doing everything we can to keep you and us safe. And what's more is that it's actually quite exciting because people will be writing about this period in history books for years to come. And so when you're an older person, when you're an old man, you'll be able to tell your family that you lived through this time. So instead of feeling anxious, try and think about it as exciting and that we will do everything we can to keep you safe.
That's a great approach. Thank you. The next question is from someone in the audience with a dyslexic and dyspraxic daughter who is 9. And the question is, one of the difficulties my daughter faces is to write words on paper. Being able to increasingly use technology during lockdown and, for example, typing the words into an iPad has helped her greatly. Should schools be more open to technology? It seems that this is a simple and effective way to improve inclusion. Jenny, Lizzie, any views?
Yeah, I'll jump in if I may. So
okay. But you know what? Back in the day, people didn't get diagnoses. It's you know, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. You guys are very different where you manage.
I think they're meant to be on mute.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Well done. You put it on mute. Good job. So yes, in answer to the question, absolutely same here. My daughters have thrived with technology. In fact, people might relate to this. On all 3 of my children's EP, educational psychologist reports, it strongly recommends that they use technology as part of their learning throughout the day to keep them organised and also to help with the writing, which they both find, well, they all find difficult. So yes, I totally agree. Oh, hi again. So I think it's not common at schools. That's the problem. So there's a kind of mindset that the children should be learning through forest schools, you know, avoiding technology because so much of that goes on at home. There is a kind of anti-tech culture at schools, not to mention the fact that pre-COVID, many of the teachers that I know didn't know how to use video calls and things because, of course, they weren't brought up and, you know, trained in things like this as we're doing today. But now they are. So I think there's a huge opportunity for us to use this sad but unintended experiment, if you like, of COVID lockdown and go forward and, you know, embrace technology as part of learning, not make it awkward for the children who have the laptop in the corner of the room because they're the only one. Make it part of the culture if that's right for the child. So yes, definitely.
Yeah. Jenny?
And I think in the interest of time, we'll probably just move on. I think that's great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Next one is, that's the meltdown question. Brilliant. I've been looking forward to that one. Question is, I've 3 neurodiverse children. By now, lockdown is really getting to all of us. Meltdown in lockdown is a reoccurring theme in our house. I'm trying to stay calm, but I find it more and more difficult. Do you have any advice? Lizzie, that's again a perfect one for you, as you've obviously had some experience, like most of us, I think.
Okay, and I think in the second half of this, I'll shut up more. Okay, so this is the hard one. This is the tough one. My 10-year-old is autistic and he has ADHD, he has anxiety. This is one of the biggest challenges of lockdown, without a doubt. My little boy thrives on routine, on consistency, clear expectations, now and next, second by second management, really, one-to-one all the time. Homeschooling has been hit and miss, to put it mildly. Things that have helped them stay calm and therefore me and us stay calm as well, have been just the obvious ones. So I'll read a few out in case it's of any help or reminders to people, but I'm sure a lot of the people on this call will be very familiar. So whiteboards with consistent written routine written out, color coded, pictures if needed, consistent meal times and bedtimes, technology we talked about, giving the children, and my autistic son particularly, access to his own technology to learn his own way during the day has helped with independence, and for him that helps with self-esteem. As Jenny said as well, limiting gaming and TV time, no games, no TV time outside, inside school hours, should I say. Mm-hmm. Exercise, as Jenny said, some kind of exercise every day. Thank heavens for Joe Wicks, it's been a godsend. And then, as Jenny mentioned as well, leveraging fixations and interests, so weaving them into the home learning and using them as reward time. So, for example, do 45 minutes of English, you can go and play with Lego or build a den for 15 minutes. Or if they can get through the whole day's learning task, then give them some time on the Xbox if that's what floats their boat, so to speak. For my son, he's got some natural obsessive or addictive tendencies. So we've been very careful to avoid highly addictive tech like Fortnite and TikTok. He definitely doesn't have access to them. And again, a bit like Jenny said, my top tip about meltdowns is from the Frozen movie, let it go. Don't mean check out of stopping home learning. I don't mean ignore them and don't try and home learn, but just sometimes you've got to stop the wheel of education to get that anxiety back down so that they're receptive to learning again. Because we all know highly anxious people, especially children, of course we won't learn. We've got a wall. So we need to be somewhat relaxed to let those learning experiences in. For me, my son spent extended periods of time out of school already. So I know that he carries on growing, he carries on laughing, he carries on playing, he carries on breathing, eating, he carries on lots of other development things that are very, very important. And the world hasn't stopped for him so far from missing a bit of school. So I'm just relaxing with it. And then just finally, to answer it slightly differently, what's kept me calm, at work, they've done some really cool sessions to keep us reminded of a few of these things. So I'll just spill them out as well. Good diet, healthy, nutritious food. We can't look after others if we're not looking after ourselves. So I do eat snacks and naughty things, but I make sure I fill up on the good stuff and then eat them afterwards. And keeping hydrated, water all the time makes a massive difference to me and to my mental health. And for me, some kind of exercise during the day as well. Some daylight. I use a SAD lamp. If it's dark and I can't get outside, I put that on by my desk and it helps me. A welcoming work environment. So for me, I like it kind of calm, and I have like smelly things and whatever that just makes me want to be there. And no alcohol. So I realised after a few weeks of lockdown that it wasn't helping anyone to reach for the white wine the whole time. So well, in the evenings, I should add. But yeah, so I quit alcohol, and that's been a good thing as well. That's just
brilliant tips. Thank you. Before you touched on work already, we've received quite a few questions on work environment and how to cope. But I'd like to ask one more home life, homeschooling, kids related question, because in particular with autism, kids and also grown-ups tend to have problems with insomnia, and this one here is about sleeping problems. So I would like to ask this one. Question is, my 12-year-old autistic son has always had problems sleeping and is struggling even more since the change to his daily routine. I want to help him, but I'm not sure how. Any tips? Jenny?
Yeah, so I'll take this one. I mean, our children have always struggled to sleep, and at its worst 3 years ago, they were averaging between 3 and 4 hours per night. And that's not sustainable either for them or for you as a parent. We looked to our GP, our CBT counsellor, and even Senko to try and get some answers. We tried bedtime yoga, nighttime oils, bath time routines, stories, everything. Nothing worked. I mean, in the end, what would happen is either my husband or I would lie alongside the children in their bunk beds until they fell asleep. And often this wouldn't happen until about midnight or 1 a.m. And even then they would often be awake around 4 o'clock. as a family, to be honest, we reached breaking point and in desperation went to see a psychiatrist on Harley Street, who within minutes prescribed Sercodin. Now, Sercodin is a slow release melatonin drug, which is approved primarily for the treatment of insomnia, but it's not yet available on the NHS. It's not medication as such, because melatonin is a naturally produced hormone in our body, which is released during the night hours, so there are no chemicals. So we felt relaxed giving it to the children. And the boys now take 1 2-milligram tablet a night and sleep between 8 and 9 hours every night. It has been life-changing for us. So if you are at the stage where you've tried everything else, I would encourage you to go to the doctors and specifically request Sercodin. They can write a script for it. They just don't encourage it because it obviously costs money. So that would be my tip.
Thank you, thanks. Let's move to work as sort of our next biggest section of focus. Quite a few interesting questions here have come in. First one is, I'm a quant analyst and I am dyslexic. At work, I've always very much relied on my support network, friendly colleagues who I can ask to take minutes during a meeting or who quickly proofread a document. When working from home, I can't do this any longer. And so I had to cover up some of my challenges, and I can no longer cover up my challenges, and they have become very obvious. So in other words, the coping strategies don't work anymore. I am embarrassed to admit that I can't do what everyone else can do pretty easily, but I don't seem to have a choice. Have you had similar experience? What is your advice? Adam and David, I think that sounds like a perfect question for you to get involved and share your views. Adam, do you want to start, and then maybe David afterwards?
So to start off with, yeah, I think I have had a similar experience. I think most people who are neurodiverse will have had this experience in some way. We've built these coping strategies for use in an environment which we're no longer in, which means they don't really work so well. Now, personally, for me, the minutes during a meeting, I really struggle to kind of ever take minutes, and so it's not something that I would volunteer to do. And if asked, I would generally kind of ask a colleague, "Can you actually take these minutes?" Because the quality of mine won't be so great. If that's not always available, I will kind of tend to go to just confirming my actions at the end of the call, sending a summary email and just asking people to add in kind of what they think is missing. But the key conversation I've had throughout lockdown has been with my manager, highlighting some of these new challenges, and especially on the email side of things, kind of just checking in with my manager, explaining these are some things. And I've found that my manager is really there to kind of help support me deal with those things. Take some of those tasks that are now much more difficult for me, which would be my kind of advice, to have that conversation with your manager if you've already got that kind of support understanding in place. And if not, I think having the kind of first conversation with the employer, with the workplace, around what your what your reasonable adjustments in the workplace are. This is a perfect time to kind of reassess how those reasonable adjustments should be provided. David, I'll hand over to you now.
Thanks, Adam. I think I'll answer this in a slightly more generic way. First of all, I'd say don't be embarrassed about asking for help. Finding some supposedly basic things difficult is common to many areas of neurodiversity, I think, including Asperger's. Fortunately, a number of things I find difficult have been temporarily taken off the menu while working from home. So finding my way to an unfamiliar meeting room or a different office, or using a new piece of office machinery, or even some change in procedure that disturbs the status quo, that tends to happen less while working from home. But there are other things that, as the questioner suggests, does make things more difficult. And my equivalent is navigating online file networks, or being stuck because a link doesn't work, or not being able to cope with the latest enhancement to our meeting software. This is the sort of thing where the person at the next desk will make 2 clicks and sort you out without even needing to interrupt their own meeting. But now you can't quite do that. Yes, it's a bit embarrassing, but in my experience, if you confide in people, they're often pretty kind and understanding, and the embarrassment of asking for help disappears as soon as you actually do so. Maybe you can message some of the people that you normally ask for help and explain to them your situation. I mean, we're all different and we can all probably do things that they struggle with. So there's an opportunity for reciprocity here. There's no shame in asking for support. And I found it was a huge relief to have it out in the open and feel able to get help. Actually, I think a lot of people like being able to show they can do things to help. Maybe it's altruism. Maybe they feel better about being better than me at something. I don't know what their motives are. People generally are helpful, and I think will still be helpful even when working remotely.
Yeah, thank you. That's great advice. Thank you. Yeah, and I think you're right. It's this first hurdle you have to overcome, where you have to be really, well, it takes a lot of courage to ask for help initially, but usually the feedback you get is very positive and people actually would like you to be successful and would like to help you. So I think I can share that view, yeah. The next question is also from somebody who works in the industry and has Asperger's. The question is, I'm a 41-year-old male and have Asperger's. Do you think that lockdown will have helped people better understand what it's like to be autistic? And do you think the experience will help us improve inclusion of autistic colleagues? David, would you like to take that one?
That's a really interesting question. I think non-autistic people may have found the lockdown challenging in different ways from autistic people. We may have enjoyed not having to travel to work, not engaging in small talk with people in the office, not having to attend meetings with lots of people talking at once. Whereas I suspect neurotypicals have been craving this sort of social contact. Perhaps then neurotypicals being forced to work at home might have come to enjoy the calm of feeling safe in one's own space, just thinking that's possible, realizing it's not a cop-out from a full day's work. And I'm wondering, maybe this will lead to wider acceptance of home working, which will benefit neurodiverse people. Maybe future requests to work from home or attend meetings online will be treated more favorably. So maybe we'll feel more included because working practices will be more flexible, accommodating the way in which we prefer to work. I'll tell you one quick amusing story. We had a meeting with our CEO, probably a couple of thousand people dialing in to hear him talk about how he's coping with lockdown. He was asked what he finds most difficult. I was thought, okay, I wasn't expecting his answer. He said it was having to rely just on what people said and not being able to nearly as easily pick up all the non-verbal cues that people give in meetings. So were they really worried about something when they said it was fine? Were they just being polite but really doubtful about an idea? He said he was struggling not to be able to tell this. And I cheered when I heard that. Welcome to my world, CEO. Finally, we're operating on a level playing field. Now, as the questioner would know, as a fellow ASPE, we don't pick up non-verbal cues. So maybe it will make people adjust how they communicate, perhaps be clearer, not necessarily to help us, but to ensure they're better understood.
Very, very good points. Thank you. Great story, great experience. Bit of a learning curve, I guess, for some. Adam, do you have a view to share? Anything you can add from your experience?
Hit the nail on the head there. Like the main things that I kind of hope from this is more openness to flexibility in the office environment, and I'm working from home because now everyone is seeing it does work. You're still working. You're getting your job done. There's no buildings on fire, and the communication like context kind of requirements. So I think personally, I've seen a lot of instances where email has just really like been highlighted as a bad method of communication sometimes when the context isn't spelled out. And it's something that I feel my neurotypical colleagues have picked up on more, because it's something that I would always be asking for. And due to the kind of absence of that personal, the nonverbal cues, as David mentioned, it is often harder to get the context of kind of what the deeper meaning of the conversation is. So I think more awareness and consciousness about how do we work productively going forward after COVID is definitely a conversation that's going to be sparked.
Yeah, I agree. For the neurotypical and the neurodivergent world. Jenny, you, as a mother of two autistic boys, what's your view? What's your vision, your hopes of this experience?
I'm neurotypical, I think, but before lockdown, I was an active campaigner for making office space more comfortable for those on the autistic spectrum, whether that was making minor adjustments to desk spaces, so allowing or encouraging individuals to wear noise-cancelling headphones in open plan offices, positioning seats in a way that enables individuals to see who's approaching their desk, arranging flexible working times so people didn't have to get busy trains, make sure that they were positioned away from kitchen areas which often produce quite a lot of smells. They were all strategies that I was working with typically HR departments to put in place for neurodivergent individuals. But I hope that what we found over the last few weeks, that all the work that I was doing pre-lockdown was just to try and make an office space more bearable for those on the autistic spectrum, not enjoyable, and certainly not necessarily as productive as they could be. And what we've heard from everybody this morning is that we've all been as productive, if not more productive, at home. So all this tinkering around the edges in the office space to make something bearable for somebody on the autistic spectrum isn't necessary at all, or should people, whether they're neurodivergent or neurotypical, just be afforded the flexibility to work when, where and how they want, and in a way that suits them best.
Very, very good point. Thank you. Next question is, I'm a 29-year-old male. I work as a portfolio management analyst and I am dyslexic. I am told that I'm good at my job, and still I very often doubt myself and I think I'm not good enough. When we started to work from home, I was able to adopt to my new routine quickly and actually enjoyed the experience. But in recent weeks, I've become less and less productive and more anxious. Any advice on how I can keep my productivity up and control my anxiety? Adam, you touched on that a bit already. Do you want to take that on?
So thanks. This is a great question, and I can really relate to a lot of what is being mentioned here. So the first part was around not feeling good at your job despite being told that you are. And I think a lot of us kind of go through moments of imposter syndrome at time, and I know that I myself am very guilty of that. But you've said that you are told that you're good at your job, and I know sometimes it can be kind of moments of frustration, especially during lockdown. I think, oh, I'm crap, I've not got anything I wanted to do today. Taking a moment to kind of reflect on your last performance review or a bit of good feedback you've had is, for me, has been like a great thing to remind me, actually, I am doing good. That's why I'm employed. That's why I have this job. And then the second part of the question, we talk more about like productivity and anxiety. So at the beginning of lockdown, I think I was a bit more excited and energized. It was all a bit new, and I kind of tried to put myself in place like a very good routine, and I would wake up, go and exercise, have my breakfast, start work, set a lunch break. And over the weeks, that's kind of eroded to a point of just, it's all become a bit of a blur. And I think I've become a bit less regimented. And I've noticed that with losing the structure, which kind of gives me the environment to thrive, my productivity has gone down. Some ways which I have found recently to kind of combat that has been getting back into writing the list of what my priorities are for the week. When I have my catch up with my manager, kind of reiterating like what are the priorities from her perspective, and kind of crossing them off as you go through, and making you feel like, actually, I've done that. That's my task right now. Setting aside that moment of time in your calendar to complete those tasks. As an ADHD brain, I often start a task, something comes into my head, move on to another one. So for me, planning that time and really carefully allocating how I'm going to do it has been the main way I keep my productivity up. I find that once I've crossed something off the list, my anxiety goes down because I've realized I've done it, and it's a reason to feel good at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's very true. Thank you. Gives you this dopamine kick of ticking things off the list. The next question is actually quite closely related to this one, but maybe we've got some views which we could add to what you've just said, Adam. It's from somebody with ADHD who says they've always struggled as you've indicated when we talked at the beginning, Adam, they've always struggled to separate work life and home life. And during lockdown, they found it even harder to switch off because, as you said, there's no physical separation anymore between home and office. Does anyone have any tips to deal with this? Adam, do you have something in addition in your mind to what you've just
So for me, my one has been, I put a block of time at the end of each day, and that is my supposed sign-off time. And I will try and sign off at that time every day and go and do something for myself. Recently though, with all the I've had some bigger projects, I've had to end up logging on in the evening, but I think putting that into your schedule of this is the end of my day, and unless it's urgent, that is the end of my day, has been a big thing. And not checking emails on our phones. The problem with being so connected is the notifications, and it's very easy to end up replying to an email at 10:30 at night when you kind of need to wind down a bit. But I'd be interested to hear other people's views on that as well.
Yeah. David, any experience?
I referred earlier to the challenge of doing something to mark the end of your working day. I mean, it could be going for a walk, walking the dog, doing gardening, anything. If it's outdoors, probably that much better, as long as it's different from work. I also think maybe if you actually schedule to do something nice, whatever it happens to be, watching a film, reading a magazine, whatever, give yourself permission to say, this is the slot, I'm going to do something that's clearly not work related, that is relaxing. Because unless you give yourself permission to do it, it just feels like purposeless sitting around. So possibly providing that more structure for your non-working hours might mean that you're less tempted to be responding to that message that could actually wait until the next morning.
Very, very important point, actually, to be able to just park things and say, okay, you're still going to be there in the morning and I'm going to look into you then. The next question is, again, comes from somebody who's autistic, and they're saying, I am autistic. I often feel overwhelmed by normal life responsibilities. During lockdown, I suddenly have a large amount of additional tasks which I need to organize. And I don't even have children, they say. Simple things like ensuring that there's enough food at home, or suddenly having to make my own breakfast, lunch, dinner, seems to exhaust and overwhelm me. Does this sound familiar to you, and how are you coping? Adam, that's again something you quickly mentioned at the very beginning. Do you want to share your views?
Yeah, I relate to this. My fridge is empty right now, and I'm very much overdue at a shop. There is just bread and flora and some peanut butter. So yeah, it is, I think, harder at the moment to just deal with all of those things, but it's kind of compounded by the fact that you go to the shop and it's not as easy as it used to be just going to the shop. You might have to queue up for a while, put your mask on, gloves, and go in, and it's a bit more of a stressful experience. So I think it's okay to feel really overwhelmed, because life is really overwhelming right now, and to take the step back and be kind of a bit more gentle on yourself. It is important to eat, and I've noticed that on the days that I put more effort into making sure I eat healthily, I feel better at the end of the day. I think we've already touched on that a few times. Taking care of yourself during lockdown is really easy to neglect, but it is also kind of so important to make sure that we don't burn out. I would say list. I've mentioned lists a few times, and I have a list of my home kind of priorities, things that need to be done, TV license, insurance, so on, and then a food shopping list, and just kind of trying to organize it in some way. But David, do you have something to add to that as well?
Yes, certainly agree with you about lists. I like to have a list to hand, even by the bed. So every time something occurs to me, you need to do something, add it to the list, whether it's shopping, paying bills, chores, sorting some files, then you don't have to worry about remembering it. So try not to think too far ahead. If you start thinking about all the things you might have to do in the future, I think it can be overwhelming. So just try to plan one day at a time. If you capture things on your list, then you can feel safe that you won't miss anything. I think it's always very hard when we have our routines disrupted and have to cope with a lot of change all at once. So maybe simplifying things. So I'm happy to eat quite similar things each day. So take the complexity out of the catering. I mean, not quite as simple as the 3 items that Adam has in his fridge, but still, if you take some of the complexity out, quick and simple menus, that might actually simplify your mental processes for the day as well. So just a couple of ideas there.
Thank you. Yeah, fantastic ideas. Thank you. Great tips. There's actually one question I would like to ask all of our panelists again. And the question is quite a generic one, but it's a very fascinating, interesting one, I thought. Question is, are you looking forward to the world returning to normal at some point? What do you most look forward to? And what lockdown procedures would you like to keep? Should we start with Jenny? What's your view, Jenny?
Would I like to return to normal? I love my colleagues. I love my job. I miss my friends. I miss my family. I miss restaurants. I really miss restaurants and bars. So those things I definitely would like to see returning to normal in some form. Do I miss my 2-hour commute each way every day? No. I have more energy, even though it's hard work being at home. I have more time with my children. I am more productive. And so to that end, I don't want to return to the new normal at work. I would hope very much that this has provided an opportunity for us all to establish working practices that suit us as individuals more than the corporate. But I would like to return to see my family and friends.
Yeah, thank you. Adam, what's your view? What are you looking forward to? What lockdown procedures would you like to keep?
So I'm hoping that we kind of don't return straight into the old normal. I'd like a slower pace of life. I think we've all seen the benefit of taking a bit of better care in ourselves and just taking a bit of a slower pace of life. London is aggressively hectic. One of the things I would like to keep is some form of social distancing. I really like my personal space. Without COVID, I don't want you to get within a meter of me if I don't really know you, and even then, it's a bit much. So yeah, it would be quite nice if people could keep that 1 meter boundary going forward, but I'm not sure how many other people will be so keen on that. And like Jenny, I am really looking forward to when restaurants and bars open, so I don't have to cook for myself anymore.
I like the idea with the 1 meter distance. Lizzie, what's your view?
Oh, it's fascinating listening to Jenny and Adam. Definitely agree with Jenny. Bars and restaurants and not having to cook for 3 times a day. And Adam, I love your comment about the 1 meter distance. For me, if there's one thing that I'm missing the most, it's the opposite. It's hugs. And there's a few on this call that I've seen the names of, and I can't wait to give you massive bear hugs when the lockdown's over.
Great, thank you. David, what's your view?
Mixed feelings. There's more things I'd like to keep than to lose. I don't want to spend several hours a day commuting, coping with noisy people in noisy offices, engaging in small talk while waiting for the lifts, interrupted when I'm trying to solve a difficult problem, or being chatted to by that guy who remembers me from the project last year when I have no idea who he is. That's an Aspie speciality, by the way. But I also look forward to the jokes or the occasional silly episodes that brighten up a working day. I want to see the friendly Italian guy in the cafe who remembers exactly what sandwich I like as soon as I walk in. But most of all, I want to not have to worry anymore about whether my elderly relatives have made it through another day.
Thank you. Thanks. That's all really great views, and thank you for being so open and sharing your thoughts, feelings, emotions, experiences. Well, that takes us to the end of today's session. I hope you found it useful. Thank you so much for dialing in. A big thank you, of course, to our wonderful panel. We wish you all the best. Please look after yourselves, and obviously also the lovely brains that surround you. Take care, and we'll see you again soon, hopefully in person. Thanks a lot, and goodbye.